Instead, we're going to have our own little conversation about whether public relations is or isn't just part of the marketing department.
Thank God this is virtual, because otherwise Doug and I could end up with fisticuffs.
You bet.
Now, and we're going to break this down. We're going to be as civilized as we possibly can. This is a very heated debate between marketeers and PRs. We're going to look at the purpose debate. We're going to look at influence versus image. We're going to look at the tactics debate, media versus messaging, measurement debate, impressions versus conversions, organizational debate, who owns the message, evolution debate, then and now. So let's get stuck in.
And we won't keep score, but because we've broken it into those 5 pieces, feel free as you're going through to, okay, on that chapter, I'm going to give that one to Doug. And maybe on that chapter, a half point to Farzana. Maybe that's the way, because it's all subjective. Maybe that's the way you want to go. Chapter 1, the purpose debate, influence versus image. And I'll go first, arguing that really PR fits under the marketing umbrella. Farzana going the other way. PR and marketing, they're both trying to do the same thing at the highest level. They're both trying to shape public perception in service of a business objective: awareness, trust, sales, loyalty. Look at Apple, for example. Every product launch is coordinated with a blend of public relations, media coverage, executive influencers and interviews, and marketing, ads, retail, influencer unboxing. My good friend in Chicago, Ginny Dietrich, she has the peso model. She coined that term, and really she codified it, right? It's a practice that's been around for a long time. Peso, PESO, paid, earned, shared, owned. That clearly, when you break them apart like that, that places PR as one pillar of a broader marketing ecosystem. When a brand earns coverage in Forbes or goes viral on TikTok, this is not a separate win. It's part of the same campaign ROI. Influence in 2025 is the new currency, and both PR and marketing are competing for it on the same battlefield. Attention. Whether it's a press release or a branded podcast, the goal is the same: control the narrative, win the mind share, be the conversation at the dinner table, be what the community agrees on. Now, Farzana, you might argue that PR is about reputation, not revenue, but in reality, no C-suite is funding reputation in a vacuum. Today's chief marketing officer, today's CMO, is judged on brand, trust, and pipeline, and PR contributes to both. My friend, that is not idealism. That's operations.
Now, I think we should start off with a clear definition of what public relations really is, because there's a lack of clarity around it. People think sometimes it's synonymous with media relations, and it isn't. It just happens to be one of the channels
That's right.
that we are known for. So if you look at the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, they have a definition, which they say public relations is a strategic management of information that flows between an organization and its publics, plural. And I think the plural is really interesting, because where marketeers focus on the customer, us PR people, we focus on a multitude of stakeholders, from government to journalists to the customer to employees to local communities and so forth. And so public relations is ubiquitous, and marketing it overlaps with public relations but no means is public relations a small part of the pie. Public relations is the pie.
Mm. Mm.
What's been really interesting about the public relations industry is that we were a little bit like the poor cousins of marketing. We were pretty much just driving in the lane of media relations for a really long time. And actually, digital and the fragmentation of the media landscape opened up this whole new golden age for PR. And also, actually, what's really helped our industry is stakeholder capitalism. And what that basically means is that the focus wasn't completely always for organizations on the selling, on the customer, but actually on a multitude of stakeholders, where actually capitalism was, the evolution for capitalism was not just to think about the shareholder, but to think about the shareholder, the customer, the journalists, the government, the local communities, the employees, the suppliers, suppliers. And so stakeholder capitalism has brought in this new era for public relations, because actually to sell a product, people don't just care about the marketing. They care, how do you treat your staff? How do you treat your suppliers? How do you deal with government policy? So people actually care a lot more than just product price, place, promotion, which in my opinion is incredibly redundant, because now people also care about an organization's purpose, and maybe 4Ps need to change to 5Ps. But I think things have shifted.
I love pie. My wife served pie for Father's Day dinner last night. It was a wonderful part of the meal.
Well, so if we look now, and moving on, because, definitely the PR industry has massively changed. It has become, it has ironically become more influential because of digital fragmentation of communication channels, and also because the idea that the activist consumer cares more than just what it looks like, what the product benefits are, and what the cost is. And that has given a huge new area for us to operate in. But if we look at, for instance, the tactics debate, and we look at how do we approach the tactics debate, and PR comes from a history of sort of earned first, and we're now in slightly uncomfortable waters where we are still operating in earned first, but we're also operating in pay to play. And that's what's, I think, really difficult, because PRs and marketeers, we're swimming in each other's lanes, and that's what's becoming increasingly confusing, because marketeers pay for attention, we earn it. But now we're not. We're paying for it, as social media algorithms now make organic engagement a thing of the past, and we are forced to put money behind our messaging.
And a lot of earned media coverage, especially local publications, you pay your way in. Maybe that was always the case, but you bought an
Well,
ad and hey, you got a story about your thing. But yeah,
well, I think it's become even worse, because I think now what's happened is really, it's so sad about the local media, because now the local media, they don't have the advertising budgets that they used to have, because all the advertising budgets have left local media and gone into social media advertising. So now the local media, they are reduced in terms of numbers. They used to be a brilliant, purposeful platform for local issues and for building community, and also as a training ground for journalists who then moved on to the nationals. And now the local media is, pretty much reduced, as well as they also have got, I think, a handful of staff compared to having, significant teams in the past. And what does that mean? That means now that they are reliant upon sponsored content. And so our relationship as PRs with journalists have changed, whereas before they outgunned us PRs in terms of their resources. And now actually in some countries you have 10 PRs for each journalist. And so we're the ones now with the resources. And so we're the ones who have much easier time placing pre-written content. And so therefore opening the door to sponsored content. So that's where things get blurry between us PRs and marketeers now.
yeah, and I agree. The world has turned, the winds have shifted, and the toolkits, I would say, have merged. Press releases are written like SEO blog posts these days. Influencer deals blend product placement with brand narrative. For an example, Gymshark's campaigns rely heavily on influencer storytelling, which is a classic PR technique. Hello, that's 1985 PR. But it all rolls into performance marketing metrics. That's what's changed. PR now lives on platforms where paid, earned, and owned media overlap completely. One tweet or X post, whatever you want to call it, can lead to a media article which gets shared, promoted, repurposed in email campaigns. That's not PR or marketing. It's campaign strategy. Media relations is no longer about building relationships with journalists. It's about managing narratives in multi-channel environments. Netflix's campaigns for shows like Wednesday or Beef combine interviews, memes, paid teasers, and fan reactions seamlessly integrated by one marketing team. Saying PR and marketing use different tactics is like saying graphic design isn't marketing, that it's just a skill within the function. Okay. All right. Now you scored home who won chapter 2. Well, let's move on to the measurement debate. which is chapter 3, impressions versus conversions. I'll begin. Just because PR isn't always tied to direct conversions doesn't mean it escapes accountability. Executives like dashboards. I call them bathroom readers because back in my day, you printed the dashboard out. These days, they look on their iPad or their phone, and I know where they're sitting and looking at these things, giving it 2 minutes of their time. Modern PR agencies like Edelman and Weber Shandwick now provide full funnel analytics and sentiment scoring because clients demand it. Think about crisis PR. If your response stops a stock from falling, that's quantifiable. If it restores consumer confidence, that's measurable. After the Boeing 737 MAX crisis, media narratives were managed aggressively to stabilize trust, but those stories were analyzed alongside of ad spend. PR outcomes like brand sentiment, share of voice, and media reach now live inside marketing analytics suites like HubSpot and Meltwater. If it's on a marketing dashboard, it's a marketing function, plain and simple. I'm not dismissing the qualitative. I'm just saying, in a world driven by KPIs and OKRs, objectives and key results, PR can't pretend that it's untouchable.
Listen, marketers have always had one up on us PRs historically because they had access to sales data.
They've done better PR. That's
Yeah, well, not really. What's happened with marketeers is, for instance, if they want to sell a product in a supermarket and they would measure what the sales of that product is before, they would get really good sort of sales data from the supermarkets, and they would measure a before and after campaign. And it was very binary. It was very easy to sort of understand what the ROI. Now, with us PRs, it was always historically quite difficult because what did we have to play with? We had media relations where we had to liaise with gatekeepers, and control was not entirely ours. We were one of multitude of factors that determined what the outcome was, including news agenda, as well as the editorial agenda and the journalists' sort of response. And what other stories you had to compete on the day. And then we had events, and we had awards and sort of speaker opportunities, and and public affairs. So we had these sort of areas that we could work in, but it was very difficult to get data. But now things have changed. I mean, now, and that's why as an industry we're growing up, because for the first time we can track sentiment. We can understand that when we push a message out, what the sentiment analysis is. We can isolate the different types of stakeholders and analyze the sentiment over a period of time. Regarding crisis, nowadays you've got amazing tools that can let you know, actually predict even if the crisis on social media, depending upon if influencers are picking it up and how long they're talking about it, if it's going to be a sustained crisis over a number of days, or if it's going to sort of fizzle out, and therefore does it warrant a statement or just ignoring it? And so now we actually have a lot more data than we used to have. So I think what we're seeing is that we're seeing a more sort of even playing field between marketers and PRs. Back in the past, we would be dismissed by particularly the CFO as, this is a waste of money. We don't have any metrics. I mean, I come from an accounting background, so I do understand the mentality of, how do you sign off on budgets when it's really difficult to quantify? And so we came up with these things. We came up with these sort of metrics that didn't make much sense, like AVE, advertising value equivalent. And we would take whatever the cost of advertising is and times it by 3.5. And, and of course, without a doubt, everyone knows that a really good placed editorial is worth infinitely more than an advert. I mean, that's just human
Fair
nature.
enough.
We all
Enough.
instinctively know that. And but now I do think things are changing. We have access to the software, so I think that our marketing brethren should be looking at us with renewed eyes. That we have the data, we have the influence, and we operate across a multitude of stakeholders, and we take a very macro perspective, whereas marketers will take almost a sort of a siloed micro perspective. And so that's, I think, something to ponder about.
I would just say, look who's marketing now.
Yeah. Now, the next piece I wanted to talk about was the organizational debate. Who owns the message?
Chapter 4.
Now, Yeah, chapter 4. So let's go into this. So this is really interesting because historically, a lot of PRs would not be included at the beginning of a campaign. You would have the CMO come up with a campaign. The CMO would often, they'd have a C-suite place in the organization. PRs wouldn't be C-suite. Often boards would have somebody with a marketing background, not with a PR background or reputation background. So in the recent history, PRs weren't at senior positions. And what would often happen is that they would come up with a campaign, and PR would often be an afterthought where, right at the end, once everything was decided, budgets allocated, somebody in the room would say, "Oh, hold on, what about our sort of PR cousins?" And someone would say, "Oh, yeah, just throw them this brief and tell them exactly what to do." And so they would fling this little bone to us,
Right.
and then we would sort of, and we would just be task takers. We'd say, "Oh, yes, sir, let's just get on with it," because it was often a sir. And then we would just often just get on with it and just execute it. And we weren't invited to think. We were invited to do. And then when we inevitably didn't get what they expected, because they don't understand how PR works, we were then just spent the rest of our sort of time defending the results. And and it was quite a sorry state of affairs for us. But now you do have chief communication officers, you do have communication experts sitting on boards, and you are beginning to see a shift of an understanding because of crisis, because that a crisis can go around the world instantaneously and can damage and tank a company's stock price. It is really real reputational damage. And that's why now PRs are invited more to the boardroom, they're invited to the C-suite, they are increasingly brought in for their thinking. And I think there's also an issue in companies and organizations that a lot of people don't understand the difference between marketeers and PRs. They often think it's synonymous. And that's why a lot of organizations are structured in a way where they think that the PR should report to the marketeers because they don't understand the difference. If you look at a lot of the CEOs, they tend to be from finance backgrounds. And so PR and marketing is all a bit of a blur to them. And they obviously lean in more to marketing because they think that's a really strong driver for sales. And of course, it is in the short term, but in the medium to long term, you really need PR. And also, what's the point in selling if you alienate all your employees because you haven't really thought about your internal comms or culture? And that's where, again, the PRs come into play. And so I think a lot of the organizational structure in terms of who owns a message is often because the leadership themselves do not know the difference and do not know the power of public relations. And those who do, you see it very clearly that the PRs are on the board, PR is in the C-suite, and the CEO is engaged and understands the dichotomy and the equal power of marketeers and PR.
Yeah, that said though, I think I can give you examples where there are very successful companies where it all silos up to the chief marketing officer, not a siloed head of comms. For example, Salesforce, Spotify, Nike. They all run integrated comms strategies under marketing leadership. They don't separate reputation from growth. They consider them synonymous, and everything you just talked about is a very specific disciplinary function, but it fits under the marketing umbrella. When your crisis response, brand campaign, and executive comms need to sound consistent, one team, one team has to own the voice. And that's a really important argument. Remember when Patagonia's CEO transferred ownership of the company to a trust? That wasn't just a PR stunt, it was a coordinated brand statement woven through every customer touchpoint. Having PR sit outside of marketing is a digital relic. It made sense when media relations was faxed and marketing meant billboards. But hello, 2010 called, it wants its strategies back. Now everything lives online. It's archived and it's analyzed in the same channels. Farzana, you see separation as independence. I see it as inefficiency.
Do you know, I think it's really interesting when people say, "Oh, well, in such organization that's so successful, they have them sort of together." Have you thought about that if they did have them as separate functions and they understood the difference, how much more successful they could be? And if you look at in the past, we had our friend Elon Musk. with Tesla. Oh, we don't need PR. PR is so redundant. We don't need media relation. We don't need sort of media
Elon loves PR
relations.
now.
Yeah, yeah. And and so, what you then have with these situations is they disregard it and then it comes and bites them. You have Teslas being burnt left, right, and center. And so it wouldn't be a marketing person who would have said, "Hey, I think we need to have a conversation about how it's going to impact all of the other stakeholders about what you're doing in terms of the way that you're sort of carrying yourself on X and in other public domains." So there you go. And even if you look at Nike, you've had plenty of PR scandals. Do you remember the sweatshop and labor conditions allegations? You also had the Kaepernick campaign, and you have the Oregon Project. You've got Lil Nas. I mean, I have just done a little search from ChatGPT on all of the PR scandals of Nike and the other companies, and I'm still scrolling. There's a whole load of them. So the way to look at it is, yes, all successful companies can have the PRs reporting to marketing, but that doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do. It may be that actually they're missing a trick. Because if you look at the biggest driver of an organization in terms of success, it would be an engaged workforce. And internal communications falls within PR. And if you give it that space, then I think that is actually the Alexa of organizations. If they unleash that, then they will be even more successful than they are.
Internal comms within PR, totally agreed. Fits under marketing. One brand, one voice. Just do it. Okay, chapter 5, and if you have the scores 2-2, I really think this is the chapter where you come out on my side. This is the evolution debate, the then versus now. What was once traditional PR, managing press, writing speeches, handling crises, is now part of a multi-platform storytelling discipline. Look at how brands like Duolingo use social media. The brand personality lives across earned media and TikTok antics. That's all within marketing. The belief that PR is distinct because it's more pure or less salesy. For Xana, that's romantic. It's not realistic. Even in nonprofits or government, PR teams align to audience reach, engagement goals, and strategic narrative. That's marketing. Campaigns aren't run in silos anymore. You don't launch a new product with PR one week and let's do the marketing next week. That's not how it works. Look at how Spotify Wrapped. I love Spotify Wrapped, by the way. And Peter Gabriel came out as my top song last year. Salisbury Hill. I had to think of it off the top of my head. Well, it was last year, right? Look at Spotify Wrapped, how it fuses user data, design, media coverage, social buzz. That's a single campaign. It's not a PR marketing relay race. One doesn't hand off to the other. It all happens together. It's cohesive. Bottom line, when the brand gets credit or blame, no one is asking if it was PR or marketing that was behind the curtain. They just see the result. And that result is built by one team with many tools. And public relations is an important one of them.
You know what the difference is really between marketing and PR? It's a little bit like, imagine being in a room and there's a singer singing away, and a marketing aspect, a marketing lens is the singer is only singing to one person in the room, not making eye contact with anyone else, just that one person, ignoring everybody else in the room. Now, if it was a PR person singing on stage, they would be looking at everybody in the room. They'll be reading the room. They will be making eye contact with everybody in the room. And what's the end result is that the PR will have higher engagement than the marketeer, because the marketeer, everything they think and do is all about the financial aspect of transaction. They're selling. And as PRs, we look broader than that, because ultimately we understand that reputation is not the result of one campaign. It's a result of an infinite number of campaigns that are weaved together through the thread of trust and understanding. And ultimately, what makes PR so different than ultimately, what makes PR different than marketing is Very simple. We are inclusive of all stakeholders, and marketing are only focused on selling. And that's why PR is broader than marketing. And I predict in the future, marketeers will be reporting to PRs.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. What that's a reach. Wow. Really?
Oh, yes. And we'll do all the thinking. And towards the end of the campaign, we'll say, oh, isn't there a marketing person we should be thinking about? And perhaps giving them a brief.
I love it. Well, I hope you kept score at home. If you did it by chapter, somebody won 3-2, right? Because you can't have a tie. Hopefully, let us know because we'd love to hear about that. I enjoyed this. This was fun. Our first debate.